Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to today's Discovering the Power of Compost. I need my coffee. I need my coffee. So, what you see behind me is actual pictures of my garden, and I'm going to just start right in, and we're going to share so much together today. So, make sure you have a pencil ready for taking notes. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and here we go. So yes, welcome, welcome. And it's 8 o'clock in the morning in Kodiak, Alaska, and it's still dark. So I just want to let you know that I love it here and I live, work, and play and garden in Kodiak, Alaska. More on that in a second. But let's dig in. So first things first, if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up. And please, please turn on your cameras so we can make Zoom a little more human, okay? Yeah, thanks. Cool. So I'm going to share my screen, right? And I'm going to go back and forth with this, so please be patient with me. I'm what you call a one-armed paper hanger, a one-woman show. So here we go. Let me adjust this little guy right here. Cool. Now, if you're like most people, you might be wondering where the heck is Kodiak, Alaska, Kodiak Island specifically. So while we're just a little bit north of Hawaii. So if you look here, here's Hawaii, and we're just a little bit north. Now, while we're looking at this map of the whole Pacific Rim, the ring of fire, I'm going to turn on the chat, and here we go. Um, And you'll find that button on the bottom of your screen. So turn on your chat and type in where you're from. Where are you hailing from? Where are your smiling faces coming from? Yep. So Dennis, where are you from? And Helen?
I live in Tacoma, Washington, and can you hear
Okay.
me? Okay, and you're looking at my wetland out back with all the cottonwood leaves. Uh,
Awesome. I grew up near Tacoma, so welcome, welcome.
I lived
And
in Juneau for 2 years and tried gardening there, so I understand your challenges in Kodiak.
Okie dokie. So, Nanaimo, Vancouver Island. Yay. Hi, Helen. And um, I had some scuba diving experience there in Nanaimo. It was lovely. So, whenever I host webinars, by the way, it's my tradition to share a snapshot of what's happening in our garden right now. So, this is just a few days ago. And I'll show you in a second what it looks like as of this morning. So yes, during today's class, you're going to see lots of examples of our garden. And I just want to say it's like a culmination, like a package of everything I teach and practice. So we'll get into this in just a moment. Let me show you that. So that's what it looks like this morning. Yay! Um, some of you live in the interior of the United States, and some of you might be in Australia. We live right there on the ocean. It is Burr. We live right on the ocean, so in that it has its challenges for sure. But I like to think of more like this. These beds are covered. I have things growing in each one of those beds, by the way. So, couple things to think about. Matter of fact, some of you have asked if I keep those on all winter, and that is a yes. I put compost down on the raised beds, then I cover them up, and that prevents the soil from, getting all washed away of nutrients. And I'm growing spinach in there over the winter. I've got garlic in there, and I've got some other greens. So here are three super important things to keep in mind as we spend this hour together. You ready? Numero uno. If you have been gardening for a while, you'll notice that what we're going to see today is not some regurgitated AI stuff that you've seen online. These are going to be little known hacks and tips that most gardeners have maybe heard about, but haven't tried. But really, it's kind of off in the sidelines. But they are based on my 40 years of hands in the dirt garden experience. Number two, these tips that I'm going to share with you work no matter what kind of garden you have, where you garden. It could be Tacoma or Nanaimo or Florida, or what you grow, because there's no way that I can answer to everybody's conditions, right? But they are all based on universal principles. And number three, if you garden or plan to start a garden or expand what you have, healthy soil is essential. We've heard this, but today we're going to really learn it and learn why. Now, one thing is that gardening is not natural. What we do in our home garden is not natural because plants there can't take care of themselves. They are totally dependent on us. Unlike wild plants, you just can't plant seedlings in tired soil either and expect them to thrive year after year. No way. So you're in the right place if you've run into one or more of these challenges. Now, I must say that these aren't challenges that I just made up or I went to Chat GPT to find. These are real challenges shared from hundreds of gardeners that I've interacted with over the past 40 years. Challenges like these. I can't keep up with the weeds. My garden soil is so tired. My compost never gets hot. And the stuff in my compost tumbler is really disgusting. I want to get the most out of my raised beds, don't we all? I don't have the time or the space to compost. My soil is hard clay, and we get very little rain. And I don't have the time and energy to get everything done. So if you're struggling with any of what I've just shown you, don't feel bad. I've struggled with gardening too. I didn't pop out of the womb knowing how to grow tomatoes. So I'll share that story with you in a minute. But before I forget, if you don't have a garden right now, that's okay. You're still in the right place. Now, you might not have thought of this, but you might be the one that gets the most out of this class because it's actually easier to learn the right way first than to try and fix old habits later. Old dog, new tricks. So you're in good hands, and I'll show you exactly how to do things the right way from the beginning. So I am excited that you're here. It's like being hugged with garden family. So let's dive in. Here's what you're going to learn by hanging out together today. We're going to fix the biggest problem that you find with commercial or store-bought tumblers. So you can put that finished compost on your plants faster. We're going to learn about making gardening simpler and easier so you can enjoy your happy place, like our happy place, right? No matter your age, your location, or how much you can lift or bend over. And we're going to discover the 3 T's, T's like turning compost. And that's to keep pests away, prevent disease, and get hot compost in weeks, not years. We're going to learn the best size to process, chop, whatever it is, your compost materials so that your microbes stay healthy and active. And that is key, as we'll see. And that's kind of a poem, isn't it? And we're going to stop the guesswork in feeding your plants, that sort of short order cook kind of thing, with a proven system that helps your garden practically, yes, take care of itself. And get ready, I have something for you. I have a surprise gift that I'm going to share towards the end of this presentation. I think you're going to love it, so stay tuned. Now, I want to be totally upfront with you. This webinar is not for you if your main goal is a picture-perfect garden at any cost, even if it means using chemicals or kind of risky shortcuts, I call them, or you want instant results and aren't willing to grow at nature's pace. years ago, and I'll stop sharing here. So, years ago, I attended the San Francisco Flower and Garden Show, and I was doing a presentation on starting a garden. And there was a lady in the back, and she raised her hand and she says, so I just moved into this place and I want it landscaped and I want this, this, and this. And she says, well, how long? She says, how long will it take to kind of get established trees and shrubs like you're talking about? I said, well, it'll take a few years. She says, years? Well, I want it now. And I just went, oh boy. All right. Impatience. Whew. And you tend to give up when gardening gets tough. We all gardeners hit rough spots. And maybe it's just life, right? But gardening takes commitment. To have success, it takes commitment. And you're always chasing the latest gadget, miracle spray or trendy stuff without really taking into consideration the science behind it or maybe the long-term impact or whether it really aligns how do I like with your values. So I know it's like squirrel or a shiny thing, but sometimes you just kind of have to. And so we've got a lot to go through in the next 60 minutes, exploring the power of compost so you can learn how to grow your most abundant garden ever without relying on fads or chemicals. The time will fly by, I promise. But for those of you that really, really resonate with what I'm about to share today, I'll be showing at the end of today's webinar how we can dive deeper together inside my Compost Academy course. And here's your reward for staying till the end. This is a fall garden checklist. And it's the ultimate, how I say, easy to use guide that'll save you hours, even days of catch up work when spring arrives. You know how it is, that spring panic? So it's 4 pages that I put together, a basic checklist. All right. I do have one ask for you today. By the way, I'm going to turn on the chat again for you. Okay. I have one ask, and that's to give me your full attention so that you may understand the profound value and benefits of compost in your garden, your life. I know it sounds like a stretch, but the planet too. So close down all distractions, you know, your phone, unless you're looking at this on your phone, Facebook, email. I want to give you the gift of a fresh start, like a clean slate in your gardening adventure, whether you're just starting out, expanding, or you've been doing this a long time. So grab your favorite pen or pencil because what gets written gets remembered. You can tell your kids and grandkids that too. So I'm going to take a sip of water, or maybe I'll start with some coffee. So if you've been gardening for any length of time, then chances are you can relate to the story I'm about to tell you. How you like my drawing? So for 8 years, I worked aboard research ships and tugboats, mostly out of Seattle, Washington. The closest thing to gardening, I must say, was the lettuce that we had in our salads. Actually, and for old timers going to sea, if you had green anything, like even a green engine on your ship, that was bad luck. So, anyway, you can understand why when I quit going to sea and then moved to Kodiak Island in 1984, I really, really wanted to get my hands in the dirt. I just wanted to grow something green. I wanted to grow my own veggies. I mean, there's nothing like the taste of a fresh tomato, right? Even broccoli. So I did my best to raise a few seedlings, and when they looked pretty good, pretty healthy, at least I thought they did, I waited for a nice sunny May day in order to transplant them in my new garden beds, right? So I planted and I watered and I really screwed up. Um, the seedlings, they all wilted and fell over. So I didn't know much about growing stuff back then, I'll admit, but looking at my sad seedlings, I knew it had something to do with the soil. I just intuitively knew that. So I called the Cooperative Extension Service. It's like a university-based um, gardening like classes. And I said, "Hi, my name is Marion, and I live in Kodiak, and I want to learn how to make compost." You'll love this. The nice lady at the end of the line, I'll never forget. She says, "Oh, honey, that'll take 5 years." I said, 5 years? This was February, and I wanted lettuce, salad greens, and broccoli by June, right? So I went to our local library. This was pre-internet, right? This was 1984, 85. And I learned about a little known method of composting that was developed in 1920s. So that's 100 years ago. And I thought, what the heck? You know how it goes. You only lose if you don't try, right? So I knew I had to collect ingredients. So I got horse manure, goat manure, alder leaves, and I went to the beach and I cut down ryegrass and seaweed. And then I put it all together in the corner of my yard using wood pallets for my, you can see here, wood pallets, woohoo, for my compost bin. Nothing fancy. And so here I am in 1985. I'm wearing insulated coveralls, and I'm turning my first compost pile. How do you like my pink scarf? Check it out. So outside, it was cold and snowing, but inside the pile, as we'll learn more about that later, it was steaming as I turned it. It was steaming. I was so excited, I jumped up and down and promptly landed on my butt. But here's the thing. It was like an aha moment. Turning my first compost pile was literally a turning point in my life. I thought, wow, now my plants are going to have that great soil they needed. I can grow my own food. My family won't give me a bad time back in Washington. And that's when I became really obsessed. And ever since then, I have experimented with and researched different composting methods. Indeed, check this out. We started out by transforming, picture this here, a brown moonscape of a yard that had just sort of a scrappy lawn into this lush garden of veggies. We also have flowers there like poppies and herbs. Everything you see here from the lawn in between the raised beds, all this area here, um, to the lower right, which is rhubarb, was grown in compost. Now, fast forward to today. So for over 40 years, I have a bunch of gray here. I've taught thousands of gardeners from Sydney to Seattle how to make and use compost. I've been a guest speaker at the, like I said, the San Francisco Flower and Garden Show, the Seattle Flower and Garden Show, the Organic Trade Association, garden clubs, you name it. Even even conducted workshops in our garden. So that's me on the left, pointing, and you can see that they're all lined up and looking at the raised beds. Okay, in the chat, what color is my jacket in that photo I just showed you? What color? What color is my jacket in that photo? Now, this isn't a test. You're among friends. Do you remember Dennis? I'll give you a sneak peek, you guys. Come on, you got to wake up. This is morning here. Remember, it's still dark. It's orange. Okay. So, yay, Helen, you got it. So I have a little announcement to make. This is kind of a win, and I want to share it with you. I want you to be the first to know. I have just celebrated 30 years of writing a weekly organic gardening column, helping gardeners like you. And in 2011, I also co-authored the book Chicken Soup for the Gardener's Soul. And it became a New York Times bestseller. And my husband took me out to dinner to celebrate that day when I learned that. So remember when I called the extension service about learning how to make compost? And I talked with that nice lady on the phone? Well, several years later, I called the office back and I said, hey, you guys, it is possible to make compost in 6 weeks, not 5 years. And they said, well, sounds great, Marion. Would you please write a bulletin for us about your experience? So I did. And I was, and I still am super passionate about composting and how it can solve so many problems. In fact, Leslie Land, the garden columnist, she used to be the garden columnist for the New York Times, she said, compost is the all-purpose answer to everything. Well, maybe not traffic, but, and she said, if you have enough of it, you won't need much of anything else. You won't need much of anything else. See, I told you you're in the right place. But this garden oasis was short-lived because my husband and I, we moved across town, and I had to start all over. But the thing is, I now had a method. I had a template. I knew what to do. If you're like me, you kind of like to follow like a recipe. So here's the before picture. This is what the building site looked like when construction began. And here it is 2 years later. If you're wondering about that lawn, you're going, yeah, right, Marion. The lawn too. Fertilizing with compost is not that complicated. It's pretty easy, really. So here's Marty. He's spreading compost all around the hoop house in the front area. And we actually start our lawn from scratch. We didn't roll out any turf grass or anything. We planted the seed and we fed it compost, sifted compost, covered it. And now every year we sprinkle it with compost, kind of like feeding chickens. Looks kind of awful, doesn't it? Well, you got to trust the process. So let's take a look at the results. This is what it looks like now. And we do this every year. And we amend our soil with compost and our lawn. And I want to show you this picture because when you feed your lawn organically versus chemical treatments, then there's two main benefits. And I'm kind of digressing here, but this is really important. There's two main benefits. Number one is you're feeding the roots of that grass. They're just plants, right? You're feeding the roots so that your lawn will look better after a freeze, after a drought, during a drought. You just look at people who have organic type lawns and they'll be much greener longer or earlier. The other thing, number two, and this is really important, is when you have kids and grandkids and dogs running all over the grass, on the front yard or backyard or in a park where there's grass, you don't have to worry about them taking up chemicals into their bare feet or even tracking that into your house. So it's just something to keep in mind. All right, so after several years, I actually got up the courage to send in some soil tests. And this is the personal handwritten note that came with the test results. from Brookside Labs. Marion, gardeners would give their eye teeth to have soil test results like yours. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying that I went into this completely blind and just kept working on it. And this is like the reward, and it just made my heart sing. In fact, my whole approach to gardening changed the moment I started using compost as the primary way to nourish my plants. But what happened next is what really, really surprised me. This was one of those benefits that I just didn't expect. Gardening wasn't so hard anymore. It felt like the garden was sort of relaxing, like letting down its guard around humans and saying, thank you. So as you learn to use compost, now keep in mind, I didn't say make and use compost because I am fully aware that not everybody joining the webinar today wants to make compost, but at least to use it. You'll notice that garden chores do become easier. Pulling weeds are easier to do. And your plants, shrubs, trees, whatever, they will bounce back better, more vibrant, and faster after bad weather. We all know what bad weather is, and it's becoming more a thing. Number three is plants are able to resist pests and diseases better. It's just like when we take care of ourselves, we are less vulnerable to colds and flu and so on. And yes, you'll also find yourself with more energy while you garden and after. You're not going to just flop on the couch and go, oh my God. And more time to enjoy the things you love. So trust me, if I can do it, you guys, in Alaska, so can you, wherever you are. I'm not a professional landscaper. I didn't graduate from a university with a degree in soil science. I didn't have parents or grandparents who maintained this ginormous vegetable garden. And even with years of experience, I really still put on my garden gloves and grab my shovel and pitchfork just like everybody else. So just kind of close your eyes in a way, or just sort of breathe and pause for a moment. And just imagine having a system that lets you grow and maintain that garden, that really does take less work, has fewer pests, and practically takes care of itself. I mean, imagine just going out into your garden and going, whew, not, oh boy, what am I going to find wrong today? So, what would that do for your garden and even for your life, right? You could actually enjoy the life you want more while also making a real difference in the world. I know that sounds like pie in the sky stuff, but when we're doing something in our little patch on the planet and somebody notices, or um, something improves, or it's like rings, a pebble in a pond and the rings go out, you really do make a difference. All right, so what's the secret to a garden that almost takes care of itself? You got it. It's compost. So we're going to discover the power of compost. Sounds like a crazy bold statement to think a garden that really takes care of itself. Okay, 3 points, big points. We're going to solve the number one problem. You'll see how one good turn deserves another. I like that expression. And number three is that perfect size for compost materials. Let's start with that number one problem. The biggest complaint I hear about composting after 40 years is that it never gets hot. It just sits there. It starts getting warm, sort of, and then it just sort of peters out. Sometimes it can take years to get finished compost. And if you're super busy, you've got a family, you've got a job and a family, you just want your compost to work and fast, or maybe you're totally confused. I get this a lot. I am totally confused about all the misinformation and conflicting information that's out there. Or maybe you don't even know where to start. or you worry about what the neighbors are going to think, or it can be kind of frustrating. And, maybe they're kind of complaining about what's wafting over the fence. So here's the thing. Most gardeners don't realize that when it comes to composting, size matters. And I'll show you what I mean here in a sec. It's not about the weather. Remember, I live in Alaska, or whether your compost bin is in the sun or in the shade, or even if it's green or pink, or it's wood, or maybe it's one of those fancy tumbler or standalone units that your solid waste department gave out to everybody. Thing is, many gardeners make that mistake, that thinking that any container will do. Um, any container will make compost at some point. But I'm here to tell you that's not the case. But don't feel bad, truly, truly, because I see many gardeners fall into this trap, thinking that any container will do, especially when starting out with composting. So it's not your fault. And I'm not just saying that to make you feel good, right? Because, like many of us, you might have been sort of, what's the term? Hoodwinked by claims made by manufacturers. It's an enormous source of frustration for gardeners. All you have to do is go online, go to any composting Facebook page, and they're going to go, why does my compost look like this? So it's frustrating for those of us that buy things and wonder why they don't perform as promised. So let's pretend that Amazon or your local big box store has a sale on compost bins, and you say, oh, wow, look at all those choices. That's really cool. And the pictures make it look so easy and convenient and clean and promising. Look at that stuff coming out. But you know what? That is completely false. What you're seeing there is really nice sifted compost. Here's the other myth you see a lot. The claims by manufacturers when you're online. Compost tumblers make compost in 2 weeks. Not. It's an absolute not. Thing is, these units are too small. That false, that falseness here, this false here is just kind of going over to where this pile is nicely coming out of the bottom. Well, that's in our dreams. That is not real. This is what really happens for many, many people trying to compost. But there is good news, and there is an ideal size. In fact, compost only feels frustrating, downright impossible, or hard when the bin isn't the right size. And that's because you need to think like a microbe. You need to think like the bacteria and what it needs. That's why it's the core of the compost pile that matters, not the outside. All right, if you're ready to turn those kitchen scraps, green grass, lawn clippings, brown ones, by the way, are turned into a brown if they're all old and brown. So those are now browns. They're not greens. They're still grass clippings, but they're changed. Um, Dried leaves, horse poop, chicken bones. Yes, it's something I teach in my Compost Academy. And coffee grounds. Into the best thing you can do for your garden, you're about to learn one of the primo secrets of composting. I call it a possibility. Write that word down. That's a fun one. Too long for Scrabble. Possibility, which is a problem, plus possibility equals possibility. So let's start with the goal in mind. For your compost to break down quickly and keep pests at bay, and I'm talking about even rats. I live by the ocean. Norway rats are a thing. And kill weed seeds and diseases. It really needs to reach a temperature between 140 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about, what's that? About 70 degrees Celsius. So here's a looking down view of my compost thermometer. Um, and oh, this is Compost Cowboy. So say hi to Compost Cowboy. It's like a little Gumby guy, you know, Gumby. I found him like 10 years ago, face down in a pile of kelp. And he's been my composting partner ever since. But he's smiling because if you look carefully, that thermometer reads about 72 Celsius or about 162 degrees Fahrenheit. And this ring, by the way, is really handy. It's a handle where you can pull it out of the compost pile and poke it back in. And the stem is about 20 inches long. So those temperatures is really where the action is. That's where the microbes are working their hardest. They're breaking down those organic materials, killing those weed seeds, diseases, etc., and turning those materials into dark, rich, healthy compost. It'll actually reduce by about a third to a half. And that's one of the ways you know your compost is done. There's about 7 or 8 little things you can check on. And that is how my compost can reach up to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, even when it's frosty freezing outside. So, why does the size of your compost bin even matter? Because it really needs to be big enough to hold the heat in the core, in the center, like we talked about, but not so big that it's hard to manage, you know, like to turn or move or put stuff in the core. If it's too small, right, it won't stay hot or it won't even warm up. It won't, you know, if you keep adding things to the compost bin, then it's not warm enough and it turns into this blob. The right size keeps your compost hot and working quickly and pest free. So, what is the perfect size? And this is a photograph of one of our bins. It's been working for about a week. It started at the top line here. And then these are bin boards we can pull out or put in as needed. And this is where we kind of chop materials is on the top here. The perfect size is really about 3 by 3 by 3. That's the perfect size to get things hot and composting quickly. Now, in my Compost Academy course, I cover which materials work best, things to avoid putting in or doing, the different styles of bins, or even how to make compost without a bin. Okay. Um, the thing is, though, if you do have a tumbler or a standalone bin, it is an advantage to keep it where it's in the sun. That does help. So there are ways, and you'll see in a little bit, to take care of your tumbler so you can get the best out of it. So to start with, you know, those tumblers and bins and barrels, you might have figured it out by now. Most of them, not all, are too small for compost materials to heat up properly. So I'm not trying to bum you out. Maybe you just bought something, or maybe you're going to ask for one for Christmas. Now you know what to ask for, right? I'm just trying to remind you that it's not your fault. You're trying your best, but you know, the industry is pretty profit driven. But now you know better. So here's a real example. This is Rita. She's from Sisters, Oregon, and she started out, well, she's in the high desert, so she struggled because she was trying to use those little containers, tumblers, and she was trying to get more organic material into her sandy soil. This is pretty dry soil that would not hold moisture at all. And until she started making compost in larger bins, that she was finally able to, well, she was ecstatic, enrich her soil and allowing it to retain moisture. Biggie, biggie, biggie. And grow carrots and tomatoes and all those things for the first time. She was pretty excited. So, coming up is number 2, by the way, those 3 key points. Here's number 2. One good turn deserves another. Now, what do I mean by that? If you want to know the one thing that all successful composters have in common, the secret that can turn, here's a tip, a pile of scraps into rich compost in weeks, not years, It's not about finding that perfect mix of greens to browns or carbons to nitrogen, that CN ratio, or buying a fancy tumbler, right? Buyer beware, or adding more of what you might have read about, or maybe you've tried compost activator. They all turn their compost. Even commercial outfits that collect compost from municipalities, um, they turn their compost regularly because mixing the materials often, often, and knowing when to turn makes a huge difference. It's what builds healthy soil and helps gardeners go from where they are now to where they want to be. Now, you might be thinking, great, Marion, but I really don't have time to compost. The thing is, though, turning your compost actually saves time by speeding up the whole process. Now, what you're about to see is a graph showing actual results of 4 compost batches, and it shows the advantage of turning your compost. Okay, I'll give you some time to kind of take a look at this. It shows a chart where this is temperature in degrees Fahrenheit, right? I need to add the Celsius on there for everybody else on the planet but the US. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 and 5, and then on. So that yellow bar right here, see that yellow bar? That shows 1 week. And you can see that, here, I'll do a little annotation here. 3 out of the 4 batches reached 100 and see like close to 150 to 160 degrees within that week in just a few days. Now, the thing is, let me get rid of this guy. How do I do this? Little eraser. This is kind of cool. Oh, okay, got it. The thing is, though, that's the point at which you turn your compost. When it reaches top dead center, when it reaches the max amount, and some days, I mean, some batches, it'll be within just a few days, like you see here. As you turn it, it's going to cool off. See how that works? This is right here. That is, can you see my little arrow? Okay. Okay. Um, so as you turn it, it's going to drop in temperature, which is normal. And then, like this one here, it heats back up again. And when immediately after it starts to cool down, you are using a thermometer, right? It's when you want to turn it again. And then it'll cool down and then heat up again. It's like a roller coaster, up and down and up and down. Now, this blue one here, by the way, this blue line where it just kind of goes up to the top and peaks and just goes down is I just turned it once. It was just a batch of leaves. I just wanted to see what would happen. But the point is, it runs like a roller coaster and it cools right down to eventually ambient temperature where it can cure for a little bit. Okay? So that is the power of turning up or turning your compost because it turns up the heat. And then some people will think, well, turning your compost, well, how do you know? Well, you don't need perfect timing or a crystal ball. Truth is, with a little experience, it's kind of like making bread and knowing how much flour to add. Rather than guess, you can see, you can feel, you can sense what's happening inside. Because it's only when you don't turn your pile that things start to go like south. Because the pile cools down or never heats up, and then it turns into that smelly, soggy mess, or it just dries out completely, depending on your climate. Now the neighbors are complaining, um, the rats and the mice are showing up, and because nothing's happening, so what a cozy place to be, huh? And sometimes skunks and dogs, and so, and then your plants start saying, hey, we're hungry, where's dinner? And everything grinds to a halt. It goes anaerobic, it's called. It's called anaerobic activity. I'll type it in here um, just for fun, for citizen scientists. And without it, starving for food, air, and water eventually, like us, they die. So first we need to start with the three T's of turning. Tools, timing, and teasing. Now teasing, I don't mean like I'm tickling you or teasing you like that. This is the foundation of successfully making and using compost because turning is really important. Now, inside the Compost Academy, I break down each of these with real examples. So, whether you make compost in a bin, a tumbler, a standalone container, a garbage can with holes in it, turning the ingredients affects every part of the process. It's like a three-legged stool here. If one leg is missing, it topples over. So turning is like the crank, the main engine that supports life inside the heap. Okay, tools. Um, I prefer a pitchfork more than those fancy uh, probes with the little wings on the end or the screw type things. It's much, much, much more effective. As a matter of fact, how do I love my pitchfork? Let me count the ways, right? A wheelbarrow for moving stuff and use that long stem compost thermometer to monitor inside the core part of your compost. Number two, timing. You want to collect your materials first, like going on a treasure hunt. That's what I did when I made my first compost pile. I went out and I just gathered all the ingredients. I talked to people who raised animals, and I took um, um, Crocodile Dundee knife down to the beach, and I cut up kelp, and I did all that until I had enough to fill a bin. Not a little bit here and there. When you make a batch of cookies, you're not going to get the butter one day and then the brown sugar and the white sugar 2 weeks later and throw that in. And then, oh, let's put the eggs in next month. No, you want to build your pile all at once. If there's one takeaway from this webinar, that's it. Collect the materials first, build your pile all at once. Okay, not in layers, by the way. I want you to, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. And then you want to turn it within a day or two. You want to kickstart the microbes, keep that stuff fluffed up, as we learned in this chart. Number three is teasing. As you turn your compost, this is the best upper body exercise, particularly ladies. This is good. As you turn, scratch, and pull the materials, I want you to think like pulled pork. You want to move the inside to the outside and the outside to the inside. And so that's how you know. That's why it will cool down because you're moving the inside to the outside, that hot stuff to the outside. It's like folding muffin batter. If you've ever made a souffle, the egg whites plus, well, anyway. So what this accomplishes, what this does is it increases the surface area, gives more food for the compost microbes. It balances the moisture content, right? So bye. I'm saying bye to my helper. Bye, Tika. It balances the moisture content because the outside of the materials in the bin or the barrel or whatever you have tends to dry out a little bit. And it introduces air for those microbes. They really need oxygen just like us. So this is what it looks like. This is a top view of me turning my compost. It's steaming, and I'm turning it from this bin into that bin, which is the easiest way to do it. If you have the room is to have more than one bin. Otherwise, I just drag it all around at my feet and I just put it back in. Nah, takes 10 to 15 minutes. It's kind of fun, actually, and you get to know your compost. All right. Number three, those 3 points, the perfect size for compost materials. And this will help you prepare your next batch of compost, okay? I want you to be successful here. So remember, think like a microbe. Help your hard-working microbes put their best foot forward. Get them on a good start. And the analogy I want to share with you is when I was in elementary school in Lakewood, Washington, we walked about a half a mile to the bus stop. It was rain or shine. Mom gave us each like a sack lunch, or we got 35 cents to buy lunch at the school. She gave us hat and gloves. It was cold. A bag for carrying our books. I mean, she didn't know exactly how things would go in school, but she was setting us up for a good day. She was setting us up to by putting our best foot forward. And when we came home, she usually had brownies or cookies for us. Thing is, though, many gardeners make the mistake believing that if they just simply toss in here's that cookie analogy, a bucket of kitchen scraps one day and a wheelbarrow full of leaves the next, coffee grounds from Starbucks, which is a great service, that somehow, like magic, compost will happen. So again, it's not about having the right carbon to nitrogen ratio or shredding leaves before you add them to the mix, or the sacks of green grass clippings that your neighbor gives to you every week, which is cool. So it's about knowing not so much what we need, it's what your microbes need to stay healthy and create the compost for you. Now, I know this can be kind of a stretch for you because a lot of us think of just like bacteria and microbes as sort of like things, but they're living creatures. So, in some ways, this is kind of that deep part. Ask yourself, how deep is your commitment to becoming a better gardener, right? And I think it must be very high, or you wouldn't be here. I mean, you wouldn't be here unless you had some desire to grow vegetables, to give them away, to fill your larder, to give beautiful flowers to a friend, share salad greens with your neighbors, essentially to be of service. That's really why we're all here. And that's why I'm here too, is to be of service in some way, to make a difference. It's like Runa. She lives in New Zealand. Let me tell you about Runa. She sent me this note the other day. She said, "Hi, Marion. Yes, I still do my own lawns and veg and flower gardens." She says, "I grow 90% of my own veg." She says, "I have two apple trees. And last year, I gave away 21 buckets of apples." Guess how old Runa is? She's 83. So she is continuing like being of service. I just love that. So back to the perfect size of compost materials. Okay, so providing the right size materials is how successful gardeners achieve compost in weeks, not years. I mean, really, too big? You wouldn't feed a puppy like a side of beef, would you? Well, no, of course not. So here's the thing. It depends on the materials, but in general, you want to aim for pieces that are about a half an inch to an inch in size. That's kind of like a fingernail clipping to the size of like a green bean. Okay, a couple of details. Soft materials like fruits and veggie scraps, and that includes eggshells, tea bags if they're just paper, they can be a little larger because they break down more quickly. Tougher materials like melon rinds, woody stems, corn cobs, even the corn husk should be chopped, smaller, maybe even down to a quarter inch if you can. And that's to give microbes more surface to work on. It's really important to increase the surface area so microbes can reach more food while keeping the pile loose enough for air to flow. So it's kind of a twofer. So you're bringing in the turning aspect into the size of materials. Here's two very important things to think about as far as size. And these can actually kill the whole process if you don't. pay attention to this. Materials that are too big, and microbes at this point can only quote unquote feed on the outer surface. Do you guys remember those Pac-Men, you know? Anyway, I'm digressing. Decomposition will slow right down. So again, woody stems, branches, etc. The solution is you want to chop, watch your fingers, or shred materials if necessary. Um, you don't have to buy one of these things. You can go in with a neighbor, you can rent one. My husband gave me a unit. Let me type in the name, by the way. The product name, it's called WORX, a Works shredder. It's fabulous. Or materials that are too fine. Now, this can happen when you add, let's see, matted grass clippings, sawdust, a whole big, like buckets and buckets of coffee grounds, ashes. Some people, they had like leftover cornmeal from something. Anyway, it can smother and then prevent the oxygen from moving around. So important to mix them in with something that's more coarse and pay attention when you are um, turning your compost. So ideally, this is like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you know, this porridge is too hot, this porridge is too cold. You want materials that are just the right size, 1/2 to 1 inch across. Alrighty, so here is your reward, like a thank you so much for staying for this long. I'm going to type um, this link also into the chat. So if you haven't turned on the chat, by all means, here you go. You can also scan the code. You could take a screenshot. You can take a screenshot of this and do this later. And that's the fall garden checklist right there. It's a nice PDF. I think it's like 4 or 5 pages. And even if you don't get all the items, at least it's a really good reminder. So let's recap what we've learned today. We've learned how composting makes gardening easier. We learned about the ideal size of the container for making compost so you don't get hoodwinked by the manufacturers. Why compost, if you want hot compost that's done in weeks and not years, and one that kills weed seeds and destroys diseases and breaks down quickly, about 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And we'll learn the huge value of turning your compost, right, to keep your microbes happy. The 3 T's of turning: tools, timing, and teasing, and the ideal size for compost materials. Really, really important. So you can get that finished compost quickly and onto your plants quickly. And that compost is the secret to tending a garden that almost takes care of itself. You know, I've said this a few times, but like it was my big aha moment. I went, wow, it's not as hard to garden. So we've learned a lot today, but there really is a missing piece you haven't mastered yet. And that's exactly what my course, the Compost Academy, helps you do. So I want you to, if you have it, hold on to your hat because you're about to learn an incredible example of how nature works. Now, this is something new for me. I have not shared this in public before, so stay with me. Have a little faith here. Now, many gardeners believe that they can fix garden problems by adding things like Epsom salts for their tomatoes or sprinkle powdered sulfur to lower the pH for their blueberries or make things better for your rhododendrons. Tossing in bone meal every year in the holes when you're planting your daffodils. But you know what? Micromanaging plant nutrition is a short-term fix, and it might even be a harmful one. It throws the soil ecosystem out of balance by overfeeding or underfeeding plants. And I saw this in action last month. A friend of mine called me. She was in She was nearly in tears because her raised beds were no longer producing beautifully like they did years ago. And this is exactly what she'd been doing. She was even using um, what was it, hydrogen peroxide, and she was soil that was too sweet. She'd actually pour vinegar on there or spray her plants with milk. And she basically had to start all over. And I talked to her about compost. So the result when you do this micromanaging is that weaker plants are more vulnerable to pest diseases, and then they just grow poorly. So then gardening turns into this guessing game, like what do you need and what does that need and how come it's doing this, and like banging their heads against the wall, spending too much money, chasing one problem after another, trying the new widget, trying the new whatever it is. So it's a little bit, like a hamster wheel. You end up scrolling for answers online, going to chat GPT, but you still wonder, what am I doing wrong? What's missing here? So here's why I want you to bear with me. To understand what's really missing in the garden, we need to go back to the Middle Ages. Trust me on this. About 1000 AD, when Saint Hildegard walked the earth. And I'm going to type in her name because it's worth, I'm going to add it to the chat. There you go. Because she was a remarkable woman. She was a mystic, an artist, an author. She wrote volumes. She was a composer. If you love music, you probably heard of Hildegard. She was a pharmacist, a poet, a preacher, and a gardener. And popes and kings sought her out. And that's because from the age of 3, Hildegard saw visions and she understood the harmony of God's creation in everything. And she also lived by this concept of Veriditas. Veriditas. This is also known as greening. She called it greening. And this is like God's divine energy that animates the world. It's what runs through everything and sustains all living things. So to help you understand what this veriditas is, think of it this way. So when you scrape your knee or your grandchild scrapes his knee, or you break a leg, or you prune a tree branch, the body or the plant begins to naturally heal itself. Now, Hildegard believed that the natural state of both body and plant is to be whole, perfect, and without blemish. To be whole, perfect, and without blemish. And if nothing interferes, healing happens naturally. This is what she called the healing power of nature. So, what I'm about to tell you might be one of the most profound things you've heard in a long time. This healing power of nature, or Veriditas. This is what guided medicine and taking care of humans and plants, you name it, for centuries, long before or leading up to modern medicine when it arrived with the drugs and synthetic treatments. Now, I'm not poo-pooing modern medicine because modern medicine has saved bazillions of lives. But somewhere along the line, somewhere along the way, we forgot that all living things have this natural ability to heal when their environment supports them. So here's the key. Here's the key. To heal a plant or a human, whatever it is. And I'm not saying that, ignore modern medicine. Instead of focusing, say, on the plant itself, vaguely surrounded by its environment in the raised bed or what have you, is to step back and focus on the environment around the plant. And then ask yourself, is there anything interfering with the plant's Veriditas, its natural ability to heal? And what can I do to improve that environment surrounding it? So hold on to that thought and fast forward to today. Now, scientists now know that plants don't eat soil like like chomping. Rather, plants rely on living microbes, living soil to unlock, to deliver the nutrients they need. And let me show you a visual example. So here is a root tip. Let me see if I can get this annotation going here. So here is the root tip, right? And these are the root hairs you see here, right? Okay. Now, think of a plant as like a farmer, and they're tending a flock of bacteria, microbes that's in the soil. And then the plant herds them into the root tip, like this. In the process, it shears off, like sheep, it shears off the cell's walls to harvest and absorb the nutrients they need. It's like a tomato root tip saying, "Hey guys, I need a little potassium, a little calcium, and I need some, more nitrogen." And they harvest these nutrients, especially the nitrogen, and then they send them back in the soil to fatten up for the next round. That's a farmer thing. And each shearing helps roots grow. How? Because when they come into the root tip and they travel like this, and they're getting, the cell walls pulled off, and then they depart through the root tip like that. Here's what's absolutely amazing. As the bacteria leave that root hair, it pushes out new material. That's how plant roots grow, is when the bacteria leave, when they exit. This is a very simplified version, but that's how it works. And it's absolutely, if I had a second life, I would come back as a soil scientist because it's extraordinary what they're learning right now. So you might wonder, oh yeah, let's get rid of these things, right? Let's see here. We got a little eraser. We'll get rid of that one and this one, and we got a little red dot, and we got these lines at the root tip. Whoop, beep, beep, beep. There we go. Whoop. All right. So here's where compost comes in. Compost is what provides the nutrients and that microbial life, that soil life that a plant needs to keep this cycle going. And I'm just going to tell you, it's called Rhyzophagy, but that's a whole other thing that we cover in the Compost Academy. But without this cycle, the plant's flock starts to dwindle away. Then the roots weaken and growth slows. In other words, its Veriditas, its ability, natural ability to heal, is weakened, and it becomes vulnerable to pest, diseases, and stress like bad weather. Let me get rid of this little guy here. Beep, there we go. So now you know why compost is the most effective way to grow a healthy, abundant garden without turning to chemicals, having fewer pests, and It gives you less work to do. It's easier to work in your garden. And that's how you get a garden that practically takes care of itself. And it's how I've been doing it for decades. I hope this is making sense. So, if you're like most gardeners at this point, you might be wondering, well, how do I get started with composting? How do I actually do this? How do I get this Veriditas going in the soil, this living soil? And how can I make it part of my daily routine so that gardening does feel easier and more enjoyable and doesn't take a lot of my time? And that's exactly why I created the Compost Academy. This is a complete, I grab you by the hand, and this is a step-by-step guide so you can build and maintain the kind of garden you've always wanted. So we've only scratched the surface, and in the Compost Academy, I walk you through how to make living microbe-rich compost that does power this whole process without guesswork or gimmicks, just real results. You'll learn how to get from where you are on your garden journey to where you want to be. So, what exactly is the Compost Academy? There I am. I'm wearing the same outfit. There's 5 easy to follow pillars, and there's 4 bonuses that I think you're going to love because it answers a lot of your questions. These 4 bonuses do. And I made each one of these. The first one is no rats allowed. I know it sounds a little creepy, but this is how you learn how to protect your pile and keep the compost activity going without sharing those critters with your neighbors, right? And the second one, and I promise this one, is got problems with your tumbler? Here are 12 quick fixes for faster, better compost. How do you turn your tumbler from a mess or a blob or stink into a compost powerhouse? So goodbye frustration. Now, this one took a few years for me to put together. This is 25 ways to use compost. This is 6 or 7 pages. This is a ton of creative, practical ways to put compost to work in your garden to create that Veriditas, right? And finally, if you don't think you have time to make compost, here's how to get composting to fit into your life, not the other way around, right? And as promised, we have 5 pillars. I call them pillars. Pillar 1 is what you need to do to correctly repair and nurture your soil with compost. It's like the foundation. Oh, misspelling. How's this? There you go. And this is how to match it to your lifestyle. All the ways to make and use compost so that it fits your specific situation. Number 3 is all about the best tools, location, 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 and how to follow that step-by-step GOT method. It really takes the mystery out of making compost. And this is the complete guide, Pillar 4, how and when to use compost, period. And this is something that every gardener is looking for. Oh, what do you do when something goes wrong? Simple, practical ways to fix composting problems. And what comes with this is like a 3 or 4 page, it's like a checklist. If this, then that. And here's the solution. This is happening because of that. And there you go. Now, each of the videos is customized with a transcript and a study guide that I've created for each one. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, well, how much, Marion? How much for the investment and all the materials that comes with it? Well, there's a ton of value here. And this is something I've created, and I personally work with you. I'm not going to charge $1,000, but you can get instant and lifetime access to this entire course today for just one payment of $197. And in order to get that instant access, all you need to do is scan that code right here or cut and paste this URL into your browser. And I'll put it right here for you also in the chat. It's in the chat. There we go. And then you'll be taken to the checkout page where you can complete your purchase. So this is what you get. You get 5 pillars, you get four bonuses, and if you buy today, you get what I call a fast action bonus. How to make compost fast, right? So here you go, just scan that, and this is how you get your garden off to the best foot forward. Just scan that QR code. Now you're about to see incredible results from students of the Compost Academy. You might recall, let's see, I think it was probably a couple years, 3 years ago, um, British Columbia, like the central part of BC, had like the heat blob or whatever they called it, and they had record-setting heat wave. And Hazel texted me to say the plants growing in the compost-rich soil did far better than everything else in our garden. And this is a huge heads up and solution at the same time because now we all know we have this global warming going on. And then Jeff, who lives in Australia, he was kind of a science geeky guy. I appreciated Marion's detailed and qualified answers to all my questions. And then Jody, she says, I highly recommend the Compost Academy. And it would make a great gift for anyone you know who wants to start taking their garden to the next level. And then here's Phil. He tried for 3 years to make compost. He was YouTubing and he was all over online. Yeah, I could never find solutions to my specific questions until I joined the Compost Academy. Now, this is a special story because Georgia had suffered a stroke and she knew she wanted to garden, and she and her husband built raised beds close to their house, so it didn't take a lot of effort to get outside and get the hands in the dirt. So she was grateful, particularly for the printouts, because she could refer back to them over and over. She realized that she was going through quite a bit of brain retraining, and having those resources available for her to go through was a huge asset. And remember Rita? Well, she texted me or emailed me and said how she was ecstatic because her compost was up to 153 degrees. And then Maureen Toomey, this is a grandmother from the Midwest of the US. She says, I've been composting for more than 30 years. I've read lots of books, watched a gazillion YouTubes, but after I spent time with Marion in the Compost Academy, what used to take me 12 months now takes 1 month. The best $197 ever. And Christine, she moved from Alaska to Virginia. Marion cuts through all the misinformation, contradictions, and confusion that's out there on the internet about composting and gardening. This course is not just about compost, it's all linked, lots of gardening tips. I like to underpromise and overdeliver. So speaking of gifts a little while back, Peter Lee bought the Compost Academy for his girlfriend, and she loves it. And then Lorena, she lives in Port Townsend. She says, not only will you learn the fundamentals of composting and you will be successful, you learn a lot of things about gardening. She says, it's like someone gave me a gift. So is there a guarantee? Absolutely. If you sign up today, you're completely protected by my 100% money back guarantee. To be clear, you've got 7 days to peruse through everything, 100% risk free, which means if you're not happy with the course for any reason, just send me a one-liner email letting me know and I'll issue you a refund. So here you go. Here's that fast action bonus surprise because I love working with gardeners who have their dream garden in their mind already, and you just want to get there. I want you to have the best garden ever. So if you sign up today, if you sign up now, the link you see there, you'll get access to that super cool bonus. It's like the shrunk down version of the key points of the Compost Academy and getting compost in 6 weeks. And then I love Jody. She also said just one of Marion's classes is worth the price of admission. So let's go over a few important FAQs together. This is me in our radio station. I do live shows occasionally, and I have a podcast. So what if you've never composted before? Well, you know what? Remember what happened to me? This is an old black and white photo of my first gardening attempt, and it wasn't until I started using compost that things started to turn around. Oh, Nancy in Quebec. She says Marion is very generous and she has a great attitude, which I like to maintain. I mean, some of this stuff's kind of complicated. I like to make it fun. So, how is this course going to be taught? Well, it is a self-paced course. You go through these pillars and videos at your own pace, however fast or slow you want to go through. And I am always available if you have any questions. And I also send you tips and inspirations to keep you going. Are there additional materials? Yes, like I said, back here, you have with each with each one, you get customized materials for each video. You can follow along a transcript. I know a lot of people like to read and listen at the same time. And then I give you study guides that they're not meant to trip you up. They are more to kind of get your mind thinking about it. Okay. And then here's Sylvia of Montreal. She says, Marion's an amazing, knowledgeable tutor, witty and super helpful. My goal is to be of service, period. And how is this course different from other ways to learn about composting? And this is a really good question because Lord knows there's a lot of stuff out there. So I've been called the compost queen sometimes, and I help turn gardeners like you and into successful gardeners. And I want to give you the right method. So for those of you that have taken classes from me before or watched my YouTubes, um, you know that I can take kind of a messy and complicated topic and reduce them to like a Reader's Digest version, like small, real, actionable steps, micro commitments that produce real results. So that's me right there with salmon berries on the tips of my fingers, and I'm here to be with you. So if you have any questions while you're going through the course, I am always there to answer questions, and I send emails with tips, and you have spaces available to come on live and ask your question. So in all my classes, etc., this is the mantra that I follow. You'll have direct access to me. This is not a bot, AI bot interface. When you join, you get clear instructions, including my contact information. So remember, if you're not sure it's a fit, you've got a week to peruse the course and the 5 modules and all the videos and class materials. And if it's not a fit, that's okay. Give you a refund. Okay, just to review the details, it's 5 pillars, 5 bonuses if you purchase today, just $197 investment. And and so if you have any questions, you guys want to type them in the chat, feel free to do so. I am here. You can ask me anything. It might be a compost question. It might be, but what if I live in Kentucky or anything like that? So, and if not, I want to say a huge thank you, thank you, thank you to everyone that showed up to this live webinar today. Um, whether you whether you purchased or not today, that's not the point. I want you to know that it was my intention to deliver some really valuable, like highly valuable information about composting and gardening. And I truly hope this has been the case. So I want to congratulate any and all of you that step forward for this great investment in themselves and in their gardens, right? And I look forward to seeing all of you in the Compost Academy. And as I say at the end of my videos and oftentimes in my weekly gardening columns, keep your hands in the dirt and your eyes on the stars. Have a great rest of your day. Cheers.